Welcome. My name is Carl McMath. I am the founder and owner of Next Play Consultant LLC, and I'm here to lead you in a webinar about perspective and production. Let's get to the next play. In today's conversation, what we'll focus on is simply putting ourselves at ease, understanding that we're going into a new world, a new way of learning, a new way of teaching, and a new way of interacting with people or interacting with our students in particular, to best put them in a position to be successful. Now, during these trying times, we've been learning and trying to adjust to make sure safety happens first, but then also we're able to still have those soft skills needed to interact with our students effectively. As these trying times are not only just inside of our households, but then also inside of our school buildings and our place of employment. So, as we always say, every play is crucial, and that means we value the small things. So today's conversation will be centered around those small things that I think we can do to make sure that we're serving our students adequately, but more importantly, making sure that we internalize these skills so we can service ourselves first. Let's get to the next play. This is over to our conversation today. Is really simple. For us to really have the impact and us to really grow our students, but then also grow our environment, we would have to see the tree from the seedling, meaning that once we plant these seeds, once we make this investment, we truly don't understand what we'll get out on it, what will come from it on the back end. What we hope for is that it becomes a very successful, a very fruitful, and a full tree. But sometimes those seeds need to be nurtured. They need to have the correct type of perspective to actually have that production occur. And so from a book that's entitled Get Better, one of the things that we learn when we see the trees from the seedlings is that when people are able to truly understand an individual's potential, they are willing to work harder, invest more, and put those in a position to be successful. And so when you see the seedling and not just the tree, working in reverse, the negative side of it, what we see is that you're limiting your beliefs. Your limited beliefs becomes reality. Meaning, you never hear a person say, oh, my afternoon was bad, so the rest of my day is going to be bad. No, we normally say my morning started off a little bit hectic. I got on the wrong side. I got up off the wrong side of the bed. Thus, the rest of my day is going to go to the wayside, or it's possibly could go bad. But that's because we're limiting ourselves mentally. Next, growth is always stunted if we're not able to see the end part, right? A lot of times you hear a lot of different speakers and people interact and say, you have to be able to think of the end goal in mind, right? And there's a lot of great philosophers, a lot of great authors that talks about this, right? And it's also part of a growth mindset. But what happens is if you don't have that end goal in mind, it's tough for you to understand what your goals or what you're shooting for and what you truly wanted to, what you truly want things to grow and develop and become. It's almost like me when I try to cook. When I go on the different tasty apps or Pinterest, I normally do a terrible job. Yeah, I see the end part of what they're trying to tell me to make. But sometimes, I cut corners or I try to do a little bit too much, or I think that my own little bit of a recipe can add to it. But not understanding that end goal or what it's supposed to look like, if I don't really stick to the details or stick to those finite items, the things that make it successful, then of course I can't expect it to turn out the way in which it does on video and or on an image. But nevertheless, I still grow and I still process, and we still try to make sure that we can still see that end goal in mind or have the end goal in mind. Nevertheless, the last part is that you continually looking elsewhere for talent that may be right in front of you. And that's always a tough thing for us to really grasp, as we all were taught growing up. Sometimes that grass isn't always green on the other side. It could just be AstroTurf. But nevertheless, when you have an opportunity to really see the end, when you're able to see the tree from the seedling, what happens is you're able to appreciate and nurture the potential of an individual, in particular our students, with a sense of care and empathy that is needed for it to truly come to fruition of who they are and who we believe they can become. You know, one of the things that really sticks out to me the most when I read this passage and I talk a lot about it when I do training on it is understanding that a lot of times we limit ourselves from our own victories or our own successes. Likewise, we do it for others. We set the table up or we restrict the table in a way in which others cannot grow. And by doing such, what it really shows us that is internally, are we really being a true servant leader? You know, being able to really invest in someone is something that we take great pride in. You know, in your everyday job, being a staff member, but then also being a teacher at Westwood Heights School District, what happens is you are exposed to a day in and day out basis of a diverse student body, but then also diverse employees. And those are things that really make us so unique, is being able to pull in multiple different perspectives and ingredients to actually understand what it would take for us to truly have that impact on the seed that we want to become a tree. Our students are that seed. And the way in which we have, and the way in which we bring our perspectives can lead and develop their production. But then more importantly, it gets us to what we'll talk about a little bit later on, is what we call at Next Play the epic gap. Epic gap, meaning that in that moment, no matter what you've taught an individual or a person, they will always truly be successful at the small things. And once we be able to see that, once we're able to really grasp that, then the achievement goals and achievement gaps can go to the wayside. Because we are in the business of not only just giving our students hard skills, but in particular, we are actually in the business of building relationships. Our students more than ever today need great relationships. People that can provide stability to them on a day in and day out basis. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we as educators, we as adults, we must also invest in ourselves. We must also see the tree that we want to become, the impact that we want to have in our own environment. And a lot of times when I get opportunity to speak, everybody wants training on hard skills or how to be great at their current job. But what I tell them is, when you are great as an individual person, that your morals and values are always shown, the hard part or the technical part will take care of itself. So we can never go along trying to help others before we truly have the opportunity to help ourselves. So, of course, we have to be able to see the tree from the seedling for our students, our peers, but we have to be able to see it for ourselves. The investment, the time we put in, working on ourselves truly allows us to have a greater perspective to impact everyone that's in our environment on a day in and day out basis. Speaking of having an impact, what we have to understand, thinking truly internally, is our narratives that we see on a day in and day out basis. You know, we come in with our kind of tainted glasses already scratched up a little bit. Our perspective and our narratives that we bring to the table travel with us. And it's not only just made inside of our buildings, but it's actually fostered and developed inside of our homes. Our frustrations really come from, when we're speaking from the perspective of our job, our frustrations is not being able to not only just interact with our students on a regular basis, but then also making sure that they have the attention span needed to be successful. So going into these processes, we've understand that people feel as though that online learning is very difficult and tough, and it is. I took classes online before. I can tell you, I'm a lot more focused face to face than I am online. But nevertheless, with those frustrations can develop fears. And we have to overcome our frustrations to minimize our fears. And one of the biggest things that we have when it comes to our fear is just a whole grandiose view of what is happening in today's world. And trying to adapt and keep on a strong face to make sure our students, our community members, and most importantly, our family members, our close friends as well, understand that we are here for them to support them. But sometimes with that fear, it limits us in our perspective and or the production in which we wish to have. But with that being said, this is a monumental opportunity for us to be innovative, finding different ways to overcome our fears, making sure we're doing a great job of minimizing our frustrations. And most of these things comes from our lens that we wear or our view. You know, during this time, it's challenging to make sure that we remain steadfast in our values. But we were all once children as well. And those that we serve, we must have a heightened sense of awareness of what they're going through. I give you the perspective of teachers with their frustration and fears. But what about that student that's lacking the at-home resources needed to be successful? That student and or parent who are wondering how can they pay the bills to make sure that they can have food on the table. Those are things that we consider on a day in and day out basis. And to be quite honest with you, people that are a part of this webinar are actually making the same decisions. It's tough all the way around. But when it's time for us to step up and do our job to the best of our abilities, we can do it if we have empathy. We can do it if we're caring, and we can do it if we're inclusive. But more importantly, we can do it if we are willing to hold each other accountable. And I know when you hear accountability, you kind of cringe a little bit because most people see it as being a negative. Accountability is actually a positive because you care enough. You know, like we always taught, at least my mother always taught me that, you know, if I ain't care for you, I will yell at you. And since I'm your mother, I have no other choice but to care for you. But it's the same way as a teacher and a staff member that when we care for our students, yeah, there are students that, to be quite honest with you, get on our last nerves. But then there are students that motivate us. There are students that remind us why we chose this profession, right? And that's why we have to stay strong in the midst of you know, unbewilderness of what is happening currently, not only just in our society, but then more importantly, nationally, right? That's why we have to make sure we're wearing the correct type of glasses. That's why we have to make sure we try to keep our lens clean. And the narratives that we have, that we bring to the table, we have to make sure that we construct them in a way in which we can really control our outpouring emotions. Because how the way we interact with our students is the way in which they will always remember us. And so we have to be mindful of the narratives that we bring to the table. Because just like we have fears and frustrations, our children, our community stakeholders, parents, guardians, and everyone else will have them just as much. But most of the time, as strong as you all are, we normally turn to our teachers. We normally turn to our staff members. We normally turn to those that care, that are on the front lines, that truly can help us be successful. And that's our call. That's our duty on a day in and day out basis, is to be that rock in stormy weather. So according to some of the different learning styles, and there's many different learning styles in which people can focus on. Right now, we're going to take the five-pronged approach. That is looking at visual, logical, verbal, physical, and audio. One of the biggest things that I truly believe are things that limit our students, and I focus on it even at my level in college, is making sure students and family and their friends, more in particular, the students and their parents understand their own learning styles. You know, are you a person that loves to be hands-on? Are you a person that do well with visual? Are you a person that does well with auditory, right? Just listening, right? Or are you a person that's more of a physical touch? You know, there's different things in which our learning styles can have an impact, but our students are also exposed to that. And so we have to be conscious of what our students need at this particular time and make sure as much as possible we are as inclusive as possible, meaning that we're trying our hardest to service our students that could be a group of students that have all 5 of these different learning styles. And it can have a tremendous impact on their success and or their failure. But when we bring our perspective, right, our attitude, it should be focused on serving our students and families with an inclusive attitude, focusing on and overcoming all barriers that may exist. You know, when we're talking about inclusiveness, what we're really trying to get to is making sure that everybody has a quote unquote seat at the table and they feel as though that their opinion is valued. Well, here, what we're saying for our students is we have to bring a perspective that understands that we have to be as transparent as possible and servicing our students and probably going a little bit above and beyond to make sure that they are learning in which a style that best suits them. Our staff members at Westwood Heights, they always go above and beyond. And I think now we're being challenged to be innovative with that type of effort. And I believe we truly can do it. But at first, we have to be inclusive. We have to understand that everybody has a place and everybody needs to be transparent, but everybody needs to be tailored to, for lack of a better term, so they can be successful. Now, if there's only one person in the classroom that is visual and the majority of the classroom is verbal, then you have to make your own educated opinion on what is best for your classroom. I would never try to get into the technique or the hard part or the hard skill part of what you need to do inside of your classroom. All I can do is give you different tools for you to think about, to consider during these times. And to be quite honest with you, these are the same limitations that we may have currently during COVID is the same limitations that exist prior to COVID. Face-to-face teaching and learning isn't always easy as well. But I think we have different challenges and barriers that have now come up because we're going to be online majority of the way. And those things are pretty much self-explanatory. Access, to laptops and access to broadband width and access to correct space and time to actually do the work and things of that nature will be there. But what we can always do is bring our best selves. And that's first starting with our perspective. But then when it comes down to the production part, we have to be clear, concise, and repetitive in understanding that the goals of the students may vary from student to student. We know this. But the way in which they're willing to receive that message now via online is totally different. My own experience is really interesting. As a coach, what I begin to understand is that I have 18 guys that are all different. They may be alike with one goal of being successful or trying to win, but the way in which they believe getting there is totally different. And so I have to make sure that a practice plan or the way in which we watch film is totally unique to that individual group. Some players are great with walkthroughs. Some players are great with watching film. But ultimately, what we have to do is make sure that they get the information they need for them to be successful. And that's what we're talking about with production. Sometimes you may have to repeat yourself in more than one way, but we all have to understand repeating ourselves is not a negative. It's a way to reinforce and or engage our students that normally will not be engaged face-to-face. But we may have inroads, may be able to make inroads because we're online. Home stressors. As we begin to understand the learning difficulties and the learning styles in which our students are successful with and trying to overcome some of those barriers, we also have to understand that there are home stressors. There are things that inside of that home environment that may not be conducive to to our student success academically. And so trying to balance the multiple different distractions that our students go through on a regular basis is things that we try to actually do a good job of face to face. But now online is not them being interacted with by their friend. Now it's more being interacted with by either family member or an older family member that needs help or needs space or just needs their attention for something, although they're at school. These are home stressors that is tough to overcome. But there's things that we can do to try to lessen that load upon our students. First, recognizing that these challenges even exist, right? That our students demands us to focus on not just the environment, but focusing on what we can control. We always talk about, controlling your controllables, meaning that when you're put in a position and you have a choice to make, you make the choice in something that you can control. You can't let someone else on the outside try to dictate what you have your hands on right now. And then it comes down to our production. Again, our production in this situation is we have to align ourselves with our student goals, that all will be successful and all should be recognized. But we have to be able to see ourselves in our students, understand what our students may need at that point in time. And yes, there will be things that would take our students' attention away. It's the facts of life, right? But what we have to be able to do is to allow them to grow. We have to show them that their time and their space is needed here right in front of us, right in front of the laptop for them to be successful. So when it comes down to the production, maybe it has to be a little bit more interactive. Maybe it could be the way in which we're teaching to kind of evolve and kind of alleviate them from what's going on around them in their current environment, but bring them more so to the focus and to the forefront of what they need. One of the biggest things I always tell folks is that if you really want to get a student to really be engaged, show them where they can be with this information. Make it practical for them. And by doing such, they will buy in tremendously. But it works both ways. We have to understand, similar to what we were saying about seeing the tree from the ceiling, is that we have to understand that our students are given as much as they can in the best way they can for them to be successful. And so it's our responsibility to make sure we show them the tree that they can become outside of those home stressors. But then we also cannot forget and we cannot minimize the impact of COVID-19 and social justice reform. Right now, we all are receiving information overload. You can't turn on the TV without hearing something about COVID or different social injustices that are currently on a day in and day out basis. Listen, we're talking about our students coming from Genesee County. And so we all know about different social injustice there, besides the water crisis. And now you put COVID-19 on top of it. Now you have to do online learning. There's a lot going on. It is. But that's why we have to be vigilant about it. This is why we have to understand that we have to keep things in their place. This is why also we have to still hold our students accountable. We have to make sure that we show them empathy, but then remind them that they have a goal here. They have a job to get done. And success doesn't happen overnight. Make it practical for them. So everything on the outside that distracts them, which leads to them having short attention span, but then but most importantly, makes them feel overwhelmed. We have to do a good job of lessening that type of stress. Currently today, our students, according to Dr. Tim Elmore, our students are this generation is the first generation to ever be raised, in particular, by social media. All the information they need they can gather on social media. No matter right or wrong, no matter left or right, no matter what the information they want, they can get it at their fingertips. And here's the thing, this is the toughest thing we ever can do, is trying to figure out how do we teach them to dissect that information for what it truly is, information. Well, I think the first thing we can do is making sure we bring in the correct perspective. I think having a great attitude and the correct attitude can lead to success for our students. We must understand that today's age, the information sharing, we are exposed to radical viewpoints on both sides. But because of those radical views are expressed, there's ways in which we still can bring it in. For example, I always tell people when I was coaching in high school that some of my players have an undisciplined type of a lifestyle outside because of their home environment. And I always relate it back, and it's always funny about this, is that people will want your students, or they will want your players to be disciplined for 2 hours for practice and for a game, but yet go home and be a part of an undisciplined environment. Sometimes they act out in school, and so they're undisciplined in school. But for 2 hours, we want them to sit straight, pay attention, and be a great athlete. It's tough to do. It really is. But what we can do to make sure that we can service our students, and what I do on a day in and day out basis, is try to transfer that discipline to another area. No matter if it's studying, no matter if it's the lifestyle, no matter if it's going to work, no matter if it's turning in homework on time, right? We try our hardest to make sure that these skills that we are giving our students is transferable. So at this point in time, with so much information overload, what we want to do is give them practical information. We want to make sure that every time we're giving them information or we're giving them things to do, we are willing to always answer that why question. That's one of the things that guys, not only just me in business, but also my personal life, is being able to answer the why question. Why are we doing this? Why is this information needed? And you answer it before you even asked it, just so you know there's a way in which you can be successful, or you can adhere to some of the concerns of the students. But then also it's about production. And that's where we get to the heart of this current situation that we're in, is the message that we have must relate and has to be one of focus, influenced by level to level accountability. This is true that most individuals that may seem or come off as undisciplined are actually crying out for accountability. Trust me, I was one of those individuals. In particular, I'm one of those students. But what we understand is that once we hold people accountable, after we care for them, after we walk them through a process, and then we begin to show them accountability, that they will always, majority of the time, they will always begin to buy in and begin to listen. You know, the greatest thing we can ever do is to show our students that we care about them being successful, but then just about them on a day in and day out basis. You know, wouldn't it be remarkable that every student that we come in contact with then became one of our mentees? And then they'll be able to, once they are older, they become someone's mentor and they can pay it forward. Well, during today's crises and times, we want to have those that are teachers. We want those that can support our students. But more importantly, what we're truly missing and what we truly need is great mentors. Because at the end of the day, our life experiences can walk them through what they're currently going through. Although we have not been exposed to COVID, we have been around different social justice issues. We have been around and heard of different pandemics. We have been around different situations that forced us to adjust to the times. Can you remember where you were at 9/11? What about the smallpox breakout? Swine flu? We have heard them all. We have been through them all. And still today, we are still here. And so that is the message that we have to have for our students when it comes to the production side. Remember, at the end of the day, this isn't just a one-off, right? This isn't just one event, right? This is a continuous event. These are things that are continuously happening on a day in and day out basis. If we're going to be great, we got to be great in this situation. And then when the next situation arises, we have to be great again. And that's why you have been chosen and you chose this profession. It's because at the end of the day, you care more for others than you do for yourself at times. And that's one of the true definitions of servant leaders. You know, one of the best things we can ever do is hold others accountable. But we always have to remember accountability first starts at home. And we have to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we can be successful. Because our success breeds success for our students and those that are around us in our environment. So, solutions for achievement, right? And I know when I have a conversation and when you're involved with Next Play, we want to give you some take-home things for you can use so you are successful. No matter if it's professional, personal, or actually academic if you're still taking classes. But, you know, one of the best things that I heard from former President Obama during Senator Lewis' funeral was that he had this quote, and it says, you know, he said, testing of your faith equals perseverance. Well, as a servant leader and the work that you do on a day in and day out as you prepare for this upcoming school year, it has to be led by faith because it's going to be tested on a day in and day out basis. But because of your faith and your ability to be strong and steadfast, your perseverance will come through. And because you persevere, our students will persevere just as much, just as well. But with our learning challenges, you know, we have to be as transparent as possible. Like I stated earlier, we have to have empathy. We have to be able to evolve our students, but more importantly, we have to be able to focus on ourselves too. You know, that's one of the best things I ever can really drive home to you all is that there's work that we have to do inside our own four walls, inside of our own head. And we have to do that work on a day in and day out basis so we can overcome those frustrations and fears. Next, the home stressors. You know, our student home stressors are things that can overwhelm them, can almost make them quit, can make them, you know, can take away from their attention span. But remember, while you're at home, you have also stressors. If you have children at home, you have to take care of and get them prepared for school while you're trying to teach. Or when you are trying to prepare for your job, but yet you're taking care of someone elderly at home. You have other responsibilities that rise up, that boost up your stresses on a day in and day out basis. But finding a great balance is always good, even though balance is always tough to come by. This is what I always tell people. Maximize your 20 minutes. Master your 20 minutes. What I mean by that is when you have an opportunity for a break, you maximize it. Don't stay in the current situation. I tell some officers that are on duty that get an opportunity to take a deep breath and walk away, go shopping, either online or in person. Do something that appeases you, that makes you happy. Sometimes if you like, you can go out and find, if you're really into it, go out and find new subject matter for you to possibly read or teach. Or if you have opportunity, go work out. Do whatever you need to do to master your 20 minutes. We can only be great for a good continuous 40 minutes. But those 20 minutes, master them. Be great at them. And be great at them for yourself. That's one of the ways we can cut down some of the stress. We're here to service our students as much as possible, but we have to make sure that we're servicing ourselves. And then last but not least, you know, the overall impact of life, right? We have to guard from information that drains us. We have to guard from information that is negative, right? We only want positive things to come into us. And even if we are bombarded by negative numbers, such as how many of those have been infected by COVID or those that may have been lost their lives because of COVID, remember that we have a responsibility to ourselves to make sure that we can departmentalize as much as we can so we can be successful. You know, right now where some of us are dealing with parents and family members and friends that may have gone through the bout or the fight with COVID. And some have won, and unfortunately, some may have lost. But nevertheless, we still woke up the next day. Nevertheless, we are here to service our community. And that's why you are a servant leader. That's why you chose this profession. And that is why you will be successful. It's because your perseverance is already here. It's already occurring. You're already showing it. Every time you wake up and say, I'm going to show up to work. I'm going to be the best I can for my family and my friends. And that is why we have to be our best for our students, because we're already our best for ourselves. This image is a great image, and there's always so many different ways that you can view this image. When I view it, and the trees, the tree is bloom on one side, the air is clear, it looks like we have butterflies flying around or what have you. It shows that this is the tree in which ideally we always see, right? That we hope to see when we're planting seeds, right? This is our ideal student, valedictorian, great grades, honor roll, listens and follow directions, right? But on the other side is what we truly get, is the reality. The full bloom side, that's 2%, 3%. But what we normally get is a 97%, which is to the right. And most people see this and they say, oh, this tree is dying out. You know, there's no vegetation. You know, it's about to go away. I differ. I beg to differ. What it's truly saying and what I truly see is opportunity. I see an opportunity for us to make an investment into this side of the tree from what they can become. And ultimately, what we see is the seed. We'll see the tree from the seedling, meaning where we started out on the right, which is bare and fighting and trying to reach its true potential, to what it can become and what it will become on the opposite side. Nevertheless, it comes down to what we bring to the table as educators, as servant leaders, as community members, and as people who just care. People who have a heart. This is what it comes down to. We have to make sure that we are caring for our environment as well as for our students individually, I should say. But then also we're showing a lot of empathy for what they're going through and what they're trying to overcome. But lastly, we have to still hold them accountable. We have to show them that no matter what, once they get out there in the real world, the world will still hold them accountable, no matter for their successes, no matter what they accomplished yesterday, they still have to be great the following day. And that's why we are here. And that's why we make the sacrifices on the day in and day out. For us to have the ability to truly vision and see that tree being full blown, but understanding that the tree on the opposite side has a lot of potential and work that we have to get through. That is why you've been chosen for this profession. I thank you all for this opportunity for us to have this conversation. I thank you for even inviting me to even speak to you all. The amount of respect and gratitude that I have towards your profession, the jobs that you all do on a day in and day out basis is remarkable, right? And I can't say it enough how much we truly appreciate you, even if you don't hear it enough. But with that being said, we still have to persevere. We still have to overcome, just so the next generation can have the faith to know that they can fully bloom when that time comes.